Hello and welcome to Car Dealer Live. My name is James Batchelor and thank you very much for joining us for these daily broadcasts on our YouTube channel. Now, today I'm delighted to say we're joined by Steve Bridge from Mercedes-Benz Vans. Hello, Steve.
Good morning, James.
Good morning. Thank you very much for coming on and taking some time out of your day. Now, just for a bit of background, Steve is the managing director of Mercedes-Benz Vans in the UK. He's a dyed-in-the-wool Mercedes Vans man too, as he's been at the brand for 20 years, 6 of those as the boss. Now, in the next 20 to 30 minutes, we're going to be talking all things van-based, the future of vans, how the UK has become so dependent on the van business during lockdown, and of course, coronavirus. Now, as ever, if you've got any questions to put to Steve, then please do drop them in the comments box and I'll do my best to ask them to Steve. But we'll start with mine. So Steve, thanks very much for coming on. Just for the benefit of our viewers, many of whom are car dealers. Now, can you just give a brief overview of the Mercedes-Benz Vans business in the UK, please?
Yeah, from a van perspective, we are now a separate limited company. And back in the old days, as it were, we used to sell vans with cars and trucks through one dealer body, let's say. So we took that decision in 2002 to separate the car business. And then latterly, in 2014, we separated even further the truck and the van business. So we have a dedicated van network in the UK, 23 dealer partners, 102 after sales locations, 80 or so sales locations, and we sell roughly around 10 to 12% of the annual volume in the UK, so roughly around 40,000 vans per annum.
And Sprinter is very much leading that charge, isn't it?
Yeah, from a volume perspective, Sprinter is our best seller, and the large van segment, as we call it, or across Europe now it's known as the Sprinter van segment, which is quite an accolade, I guess. We sell medium vans in terms of the Vito and small van with the Citan. And of course we had still have the X-Class pickup as well.
Yeah. And obviously with Sprinter, there's a vast number of conversions and different body styles. I'm going to put you on the spot here. How many different styles of body and conversions can you have with the Sprinter?
Oh, wow. My training colleagues will kill me for this because, of course, we do say this in our training courses, but it is literally thousands. If you think about it logically, we have vans in 3 wheelbases, body lengths, the multiplication of colors, roof heights, then chassis cab derivatives, so everything from an ambulance through to a cherry picker through to a refrigerated vehicle. And then just think of the concept of how many different types of refrigeration there would be. So to give you an exact answer would be shooting from the hip, but it's literally thousands, James. Yeah.
And I mean, like you say, that's quite an accolade that Sprinter has become sort of, it's the type has become the Sprinter class of van. Obviously partly the reason for that is the number that you sell across Europe, but do you think that's also because it's such a recognizable van, whereas things like the Transit, for example, just using that as an example, the range of that van has proliferated, it's diversified, whereas Sprinter, everybody knows what a Sprinter is, don't they?
It's something I think about actually from time to time myself. And I think if I go back to certainly before 1995, so before I started at Mercedes, and I've been in this industry since I was 17, so without giving you the exact numbers, it's 30 plus years. And back in those days, there was, certainly my recollection was that there was Transit, there was Mercedes, but the old T1 bullnose vehicle. For those that are as old as me, to select first gear, you had to go backwards in the gearbox, so it looked like reverse. And then, of course, you had things like the Bedford CF and so on. But there wasn't really anything else other than the Transit, and the Transit was iconic and had been around a long, long time. So in 1995, we brought the Sprinter to market, and that gave us really In hindsight, I think the first scalable and saleable volume van for us as a brand. So when I look back at those numbers to 1995, we were selling less than 2,000 vans a year in Great Britain. All right, the market was a bit smaller, but nevertheless, since then we've grown to 45,000 units a year. So I think really it was a game changer. And then, of course, things like safety, first to market with ABS. The whole van business now has become much more professional, much more car-like in the driving style. And I think also van buyers are a lot more discerning. They expect everything, aircon, CD player. And back in those days of Transit, T1, Mercedes and CF, I don't think aircon and CD player were even invented, right? So, we've come a long way.
And you've also come a long way in terms of the generations of the Sprinter. I mean, the last Sprinter I drove was the previous one, and that seemed very car-like. But the new one, what with its infotainment system and the quality of the build inside, I mean, gone are the days of a van just being a workman's-like tool.
Yeah, and actually it was a journey we had to go on. I remember a friend of mine who worked in a plant and utilities business in Preston, and we were trying to sell him or his fleet some Sprinters some 10 years ago. And his actual words were to me at the time were, "They're just too nice, Steve." They're just too nice. Because of course they were giving the gangs who dug holes in the road or repaired a water leak, in his opinion, too nice a vehicle. I think those days have changed now. And I think, as I said before, the operators, users of these vans are a lot more, let's say, discerning. And certainly if you pull up at a building site now, it's a little bit like the car at the golf club, isn't it? Who's got the best car at the golf club? Who's got the best van on the building site? And then the fleets are a lot more discerning as well. They consider safety, obviously, now to be a huge priority. I'm not saying they didn't before, but legislation now forces them down that route. So, safety, comfort, fuel economy, all of those things have played a part in professionalizing the industry, really.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the dreaded C word, which is, of course, is coronavirus. How is that? Now, many of our viewers will obviously know how devastating it's been to the new car market, less so the used car market. How has it been in the van world?
Well, the market itself has also been decimated, but of course the press coverage is a lot more car related because of course that's the bigger number. If I was to tell you that in March and April, the numbers for us in terms of the market were sort of 90 and 85% down, give or take, it gives you an idea of, the impact the van market received in the same way that the car market did. I think from our point of view, personally, we were quite, I wouldn't say surprised, but pleasantly shocked, if that's the right word, by the increase in volume that we received during the period of March and April. So the market was very depressed, but our volumes grew. And they were nowhere near the same volume as they were in the same period last year, obviously. But then if you think about it logically, the markets that we're successful in, be that e-grocery or delivery of food to people's homes, parcels, even ambulances, the orders started to come in as the demand for these segments and sectors grew because everybody was at home. And you and I both know that to get an online delivery slot from a supermarket was really tricky. Probably still is to a degree.
Yeah.
So with some of the big supermarkets that we supply, we were actually giving them back some of their used vehicles that they'd returned to us. So one particular client, we gave them back 400. So we brought 400 in, swapped them for new ones. And then they phoned us and said, can we have the old ones back? So we refurbished them and sent them back out. So the flexibility for us was there for all to see. So yeah, it's a huge impact, of course. I mean, the sad state of affairs with the coronavirus is obvious, but we were there to keep businesses moving, James, and that's what we do. So, that helps us really distinguish between car and van, because the van division, which I lead, really had to adapt and evolve to that new normal.
Yeah. Now, in the used car market, dealers are reporting values are very strong. In some sectors, they're going up, and used car sales are very strong because people are obviously concerned about using public transport and so on and so forth. I would presume that used van values have also gone up as well at the lower end of the market.
Yeah, in every area, really. I mean, the volumes have grown. Those dealers that we have that are strong in that used van market have seen a definite upturn in orders or new customers. And I think for us, if I was to say what is an area of weakness for us as a brand, it would be used vehicles normally. We've seen that through this pandemic, and you should never waste a good crisis, obviously. So it's something that, we're looking at now to inject further emphasis into used vehicles, because as you rightly say, it's a key part of profitability for dealers, for dealer throughput through the workshops and part sales as well.
Now, as we well know, the nation relied upon vans during lockdown. I mean, they provided, life-saving services in many sectors. Would you say that up to now, vans have had a bit of a PR issue, that they haven't been particularly well loved by the nation? That must be changing now.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of ways of looking at it. Obviously, the term white van man, referencing the colour of the van, obviously, because the majority of them are white vans, is something that newspapers liked to tag. So it was white van man, 80, 90 miles an hour in the outside lane. We know the stories. But of course, I would like to refer to the van drivers now and the people who are delivering things or saving people's lives as the unsung heroes that we have. I mean, during the period of time that I've been working from home, I don't know if you're anything like me, James, but I'm sort of somewhat addicted to that one-click thing with Amazon. So honestly, I've ordered everything from a chainsaw through to wet weather golf gloves.
I know, it's terrible when you just swipe it as well. It knows all your details, and before you know
it. So of course, the lads and ladies who come to deliver to my house, I know them by name personally. So I wouldn't say they're personal friends, but they're certainly acquaintances now. And they've had to work longer hours. I mean, our business barometer survey said that on average, these guys are working an extra 5 hours a week more than they were previously. And my own little survey of that, a guy came here the other night at 9:30. He's a guy called Tim. He works for Hermes. And I asked him why he was so late, and he still had another 14 drops to do. And he had 303 drops on his van that day. So these are unsung heroes. The obvious ones are paramedics. Paramedics drive vans. A lot of sprinters within that, but I would never, ever, ever call a paramedic a van driver. That would be a bit foolish.
Yeah. Let's talk about electric vans. And Mercedes-Benz are very much leading the way with electric vans at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, I think whether we're leading the way is another question. I mean, there are obviously people in the market who are bringing electrification into mainstream a little bit quicker than we are. However, having said that, we've had electric vehicles before. We had an electric vehicle for a full electric van for the 1972 Olympics in Munich. So none of this is very new. I was only small then, so I don't really remember it too well, but I've seen it at the museum. And of course, the technology is not really tenable, because as you open the back doors of that van, it's just littered with batteries, sort of linked together in series. But the range anxiety and the payload anxiety in the van industry or the van market is something that is the problem, because everybody wants to operate exactly the same way as they do with diesel or in the past petrol. So we're changing now the way that we go to market. It's a consultative sell. And I'm not massively hung up about being first to market or being the highest in market share. What I want to do is to provide the right vehicle for the client. Morally, that is the right thing to do. Professionally, that is the right thing to do. And if that means that I have to lose a couple of sales to some of the new kids on the block at the beginning, then so be it. But I won't ever sell something to someone that isn't the right thing. And therefore, that journey, if you will, we are very much at the beginning of as a business and also as a country, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's battery range, because there's one thing for certain: if you put more batteries in a vehicle, the payload will diminish. And whilst the gross vehicle weight might have gone up slightly to operate an alternative fuel vehicle, nothing much else has changed. So yeah, you're right. It's something that will come, and in the next 10 years, we'll have to manage our way through it. And I think there'll be an option for people to have diesel, people to have alternative fuel. Probably that will be electric. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, many car dealers watching this show, they know that electric cars have taken a long time to gain acceptance. And there's an argument to be said that's still not quite there yet. It's growing, and it's grown massively in the last couple of years or so. It's still some way to go. In terms of the van market, do you think that's going to be similar over the next 10 years? Do you think it's going to take a long time for van drivers to properly consider an electric van?
Yes, and there are parts of the market that immediately want one. So we had a zero-emission Vito in 2013, and I ordered a couple of hundred of them. Immediately, everybody wanted one. And then they realized that actually they couldn't go as far as they thought they could go, and they couldn't carry as much as they thought they could carry. So all of a sudden, that, how can I put it, pent-up enthusiasm and saving on fuel and being very green, etc., sort of diminished. So this consultative sales aspect is very, very important. You have to look at what the client does, ask them what they do in detail, and then provide them the right solution. So if you're running a small franchise, going cleaning people's ovens in a town or a city, then yeah, a zero emission electric vehicle would be perfect. You go home at night, you plug it in, you go out in the morning, you run for no real mileage. But if you are delivering 300 drops a day, like I mentioned, my friend from Hermes, could be a bit of a problem if you've run out of electricity on drop number 12.
Yeah. And also, we're not seeing this with cars just yet, but if the van market really does, quickly adapt to electric vans, there's going to have to be, the infrastructure is going to have to be improved. I hate to use that word infrastructure because that is always the criticism levied at electric vehicles, but it really is going to have to increase if van drivers are going to be using electric vans on long distances.
Yeah, it's a very interesting subject. I spent some time with the National Grid, and the National Grid are responsible for the infrastructure in the UK in terms of high voltage. And my immediate discussion with them was along the lines of there's not enough electricity. They laughed at me and they said, everybody says that. And actually they convinced me that there is enough electricity. And the sources of the electricity are interesting. So if you think about coal and gas, those things that 20 years ago we were very much dependent upon, nowadays, certainly coal-fired power stations are not really switched on. So wind and solar are two of the big renewables. The problem, of course, is that you can't store electricity. So if it's very windy and there isn't enough demand for it, then we just have to turn the turbines off and so on. So there is, how can I put it, a clever piece of work to do as part of the consultative sell with the clients to say, where do you source your electricity from? And then, of course, you look at people like the obvious one is Octopus Energy, who sell renewables, and somehow plugging that, if you will, into the solution for the end user gives us a total loop. And that's really the way forward. So the infrastructure in terms of hard infrastructure, charging points and so on, is the obvious one people refer to, and whether the plug plugs into the vehicle and so on. And I think just picking up on that point, if we all drive up and down the motorway and we run out of fuel, we just pull off at the services. You know, the drama with the services is the sort of gulp when we look at the price per litre in comparison to Tesco or a supermarket. But just imagine that we were to pull up and there's a massive queue because everybody is 45 minutes charging up to 80%. So we have to go on this journey together. It isn't a case of me as a manufacturer just going hungry for market share. I'm not prepared to do that. As I say, my job is to keep businesses moving. It's what I do. And, you know, if I'm selling somebody some electric vehicle and the infrastructure isn't there, then I'm not doing that and not fulfilling my part. So it's a big piece of work, as you rightly point out.
Yeah. No, it's going to be fascinating to see how that pans out, really, because, you know, you know, a lot of people criticize electric cars saying, there's going to be an enormous queue at the welcome brake services at Warwick, for example. But people's lifestyles and their mentalities are changing. They're adapting. What with larger batteries being put into cars. But with vans, it's totally different, isn't it? Because like Tim, who's doing 300 drops, he's going to have to rely upon a reliable infrastructure. So it's going to be fascinating to see how that plays out, really. Can I just talk to you about taxis? And now, as we know, Mercedes-Benz was a big disruptor in the black cab market in London and the taxi market in general. And, you know, it's changed a little bit, what with the range extending LEVC TX5 recently. What are Mercedes-Benz's plans with the Vito taxi?
For London specifically, I'll answer, and then I can reference the region. So for London specifically, we were almost forced out of that market as a result of the ultra-low emission zone. Yeah. So the ULEZ really promoted, and rightly so, a zero emission from the tailpipe solution in the city. Again, for the same reasons that I referred to before, we would only bring a vehicle to market that is sustainable, reliable, and so on. So for us as a brand, to bring an electric taxi to market quickly, quick for us is probably 3 years of testing. Quick for Sadiq Khan is probably 3 weeks of testing. So we wouldn't rush, if you will, a little bit like the tortoise and the hare. So when we bring our 100% zero emission, fully tested Vito Tourer to market, the adaptation of that then to the London market will depend very much upon achievement of the turning circle. And that is a decision that we have to make as to whether we want to engineer that solution for the volume or not, or whether the turning circle is removed from the requirement in London to open that market up to more players. So that's a political decision, really, not one for us as a manufacturer. For the rest of the UK, because there's more to life than just London, obviously, when we do bring the Vito Tourer in electric form, which is here now, we'll market that as a successful cab across the regions. But you're probably aware, James, that every region has to do their own testing for dimension and acceptability. And that's why we have such a diverse range of taxis in the UK. It's not like in Germany, for example, where if an E-Class is allowed as a taxi, it's allowed as a taxi in Dusseldorf, Munich, and so on. Every area has its own rules.
Mm-hmm. We've had a couple of questions come in surrounding the X-Class. Now, for a lot of dealers, that's a car they may have taken part exchange or whatever, and they're very familiar with it. and unfortunately, it's coming to the end of its life now, isn't it? What do you think sort of went wrong with that? And are we going to see anything in the future?
I think for us, the pickup market is a world vehicle. So, we're obviously talking here about the UK.
Yeah.
From a UK point of view, I don't think anything went wrong with it at all. I think it's a premium product. We pitched it against other premium vehicles as well. But it's a well-served market in the UK. Let's be honest, nobody builds bad pickups, I don't think. And of course, the loophole, if you can call it that, with tax benefit is something that, maybe at one day may get closed. So add to that challenges around WLTP, emissions. Is the vehicle a commercial vehicle? Is the vehicle not a commercial vehicle? But to answer your question, what went wrong with it? Nothing in the UK. It was more a question of volumes, in particular in other countries for us, and the decision was taken to withdraw from that segment. It's something that happens from time to time within brands. We do it on certain car models as well, so as well as commercial vehicles.
Yeah. I mean, what with Ford and Volkswagen, teaming up again to build the next range of pickups, the pickup market is here to stay, isn't it? It's not a fad. It's still an area of huge growth and profitability for manufacturers.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, it would not be nothing to do with the competition. I mean, my mantra in life is to beat the competition. So I wouldn't be worried too much about what the others were doing. I mean, I'm a Bolton Wanderers fan, I'm used to winning. No, I joke. But I think you're right. The pickup segment, in a country that's always raining, it is quite odd in a way that we do have that segment. But of course, for us, because as I said before, we sell in loads and loads of other countries, pretty much every country in the world. It's something that we looked at as a world decision rather than a local decision.
Yeah. Another sector that I suppose has mushroomed during coronavirus has been camper vans. Now, I know I'm not sure whether that specifically comes under your remit, but have you heard about how Marco Polo's been popular, or have you got sort of anecdotal evidence?
I have no anecdotal evidence. I have some factual evidence that is the camper market in the UK is a high one and growing. The problem with it is the understanding of how to deal with it. And if we're talking to dealers here on the phone or on the Zoom call, they will understand exactly what I mean, because how would we ever upskill every single salesperson in a dealer network, whether it is Mercedes-Benz or whoever, to be able to adequately value the part exchange of a specific type of vehicle that somebody had brought in to swap against a Mercedes or a Ford or whatever. So there is a market for the vehicle, obviously, but I firmly believe that there is a specialist segment for this. Trying to push it into car segments and trying to push it into commercial vehicle segments probably doesn't work, or at least it would work, but it wouldn't be optimal. Because if a family is looking to make a purchase of that size, they want to be looked after and they want to spend 2, 3, 4 hours perhaps, not so much on the base vehicle, but more about the superstructure. What color taps does it have? What is the toilet? What does the microwave do, etc. Now let's just think about that in dealer land. How could we possibly train everybody to know all of those facets? On a Marco Polo, yes, easy enough to do. Standard vehicle, pretty much. But when we start to get into bespoke coach-built conversions on chassis, which is the big market, that's a specialist field, James, and it requires an infrastructure to do that. And that's why those motorhome dealers actually exist and do very well. Same for caravans.
Has Mercedes had to increase the number of Marco Polos it brings into the UK?
Yes. it's a black art ensuring that you have the right volume to suit any market. So the answer is yes, as people are on staycation now, of course. So, a lot of people sort of say, well, look, let's go for a camper van. Some of it might be novelty, some of it might be something they've well researched, but the answer would be yes.
Yeah. And I suppose you've got to be mindful of the fact that this is just a blip, isn't it? Well, hopefully just a blip. The expectation is that people will go back to their usual types of holidays. And by investing hugely in the dealer network, by taking Marco Polo, training them up, it may not, further down the line, it may not actually be a profitable thing to do.
Yeah, you say that, and I understand why you say that. But if you look over the last 10 years, the sort of leisure market, if you will, has been on the increase, irrespective. So yes, you will get the odd blip. Perhaps in 2008, the financial crisis was something. Even when 9/11 happened, when people didn't fly or they were afraid of flying. So there will always be those types of blip. But there are many, many people that like to stay in the UK and certainly travel to Europe as well. And again, part of what we have to do is ensure that we have, a good enough network to be able to cope with the family that are maybe inbound from Italy, for example. And let's just imagine that they arrived in, I don't know, they were touring around the Lake District and we didn't have the right infrastructure to look after them when they did break down. That could be a huge problem. So lots and lots of facets to it.
Well, fantastic. I think we're going to have to leave it there, Steve, today. But it's been fascinating learning more about the business and to finally meet you and to catch up. So thanks very much for coming on.
Pleasure.
Now, this week on Car Dealer Live, we're changing our broadcasting schedule. Actually, we're changing to Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So on Friday this week, we've got Vanarama and its CEO, Andy Alderson. And on Friday, we end the week with Tom Blackmore from Divine Automotive. If you want to get involved in shows like this, please do email me, james.batchelor@blackballmedia.co.uk, or email James Baggott, and he's available at james@blackballmedia.co.uk. That just leads me to say thank you very much indeed for joining us, and we'll see you on Wednesday. Bye-bye.